Georgina sat next to Maikar, while Kate was seated next to Jane. They had their white rice and salad. In addition, they also had juice, fruits, and lots of chickens. It was a very beautiful moment as they chatted and laughed together. Maikar would scoop a sizable portion from his own plate, and then he would dip into the mouth of Georgina. She smiled as she began to chew the rice in her mouth. It was an interesting scene for Jane and Kate, who kept looking at each other and trying to hide their smiles. But this awesome moment would soon be cut short when the entire house was engulfed with fire. The gangs had invaded his mansion and suddenly they began to bombard the walls with bombs and bullets. The first grenade landed in the dining room and it was at the feet of Georgina, but before this grenade could explode, Maikar pushed her away and the grenade exploded, pushing him onto the wall. He landed with his back on the ground and he began to vomit blood. But these men were firing from all angles and all the ladies could do was lie down on the ground, screaming on top of their voices. Another grenade landed again and the target too was Georgina, but even from a distance, Maikar still pounced on this grenade. He held it in his hand and threw it back at these guards, but the explosion also launched him against the wall. He was now struggling to stand up on his feet. Georgina was in tears, seeing the height of risks Maikar was willing to take for her. She roared like a lioness and her voice shook the foundation of the building. She was still not fully fit after the last operation that she had. With her feet, she kicked open the door and she grabbed two powerful rifles, and with her feet, she kicked a gun towards Maikar as well. "We live and die together, Maikar. Let's do this," she said, and all of a sudden, a new wave of strength and energy erupted in them. They began to shoot back at these men. One by one, they were being taken down. "Who is this girl?" Maikar said to himself. He was astonished by her mastery in handling two heavy rifles at the same time. While the other two ladies laid on the ground covering their ears with their hands, Georgina was already near the window and she had already gunned down 4 men. These guards were fearless and they began to push further into the building. They had used their bombs and grenades to demolish the outside walls, and through those openings, some of them were able to gain entry into the house. The whole rooms were covered with smoke to prevent these men from locating them. One of these guys entered the other room where Kate and Jane were still cowering on the ground. He quietly drew his knife and was about to slay them when Georgina pounced on his head right from the ceiling. She jumped on his head and her weight forced the guy to land on the ground. Then she wrapped her 2 thighs around his head to keep him from moving, before shooting him on his face multiple times. Kate and Jane were terrified by what they saw. So, they asked, "How did you do that? It was so fast and you killed him so easily. Were you in the army before? Who taught you how to swing your legs so fast? I am impressed." But Georgina didn't even reply any of their questions. She was panting and gasping for air. She was already tired and was resting her back on the floor when 2 other men jumped in through the broken window. She tried to shoot them first, but she realized that she is out of bullet. The guards pointed their guns at her, and she raised her hands up. Then they forced her to her knees, and just when they were about to pull the trigger, Maikar intervened. He took them out with his own gun and they all fell on the ground. Georgina ran towards him and she hugged him so tightly, and even when Maikar wanted to pull out of this hug, she didn't let go. She was sobbing bitterly and her grip on him was too tight. "I love you so much, Maikar," she said. "We don't have enough time. Even though we have killed many of the enemies, there are still a lot of them, as you can hear from their gunshots. You need to leave with your friends. I will sacrifice myself for you. But promise me you will never forget me, Georgina," he said with a quaking voice. For the first time, Maikar shed tears from his eyes. Georgina could not agree with his suggestions. She was scared that Maikar would not be able to handle such group of people. She preferred to die with him. "We die together, Maikar. I will never forgive myself if anything ever happens to you. First, it was Frank who loved and cared for me. He is in my heart even up till now. I don't even know if he is alive or dead. Now just when I found another love. You want to sacrifice yourself again? I will never leave you here. My friends can escape through the hidden tunnel, but as for me, I will never abandon you. I love you, my car. Please don't push me away. She held him so tight without letting go. The men were already close by. They were now climbing up the stairs in search of their target. They thought that he had exhausted his ammunition. So they would break into a room by kicking it open, and once they found it empty, they would move on to another room. Please, Georgina. Leave now. Take this map. It would guide you through the tunnel and into a rural settlement. You will be safe for now. Then he pulled in her face and began to kiss her lips so passionately without letting go. After a while, he had to force his lips out of her mouth. I love you, Georgina, he said, and the other two ladies led Georgina out of the room and into the tunnel. But along the way, they heard a heavy loud explosion that shook the earth. Micah's house had been demolished and reduced to rubbles by this evil gang. No, you! Georgina screamed, having realized what had happened, and suddenly she collapsed on Kate's body. Micah's house was gone. And no trace of Micah in the house. But there was no way he could have escaped such a heavy collapse of a large building. By the next day, the news had gone online, even printed on newspaper. It was the topic for everyone, whether in the house, in the market, in the office. Micah was laid on a stretcher and carried to a special unit. At this point, he was almost unconscious. Save him, Doc. He is my childhood friend. I don't want him dead because he has many questions to answer. What's next, Cap? They asked Frank, who was now the leader of his squad. We can request for reinforcement from Nigeria, suggested Officer Ali. Not a good idea at all. I don't want this to turn into a war between Nigeria and South Africa. Many innocent souls will lose their lives. What's our next move? This chemical substance will be released in 1 week. After which, there is nothing we can do about it. Let's attack the presidential villa and capture the president. We can use him to negotiate with the Chinese, said Officer Jackie. This Chinese organization has no regard for the president. He is just their puppet. And even if he dies, they won't give a dime. Replied Officer Sergi. Only one person can help us in this case. My sister. No, we won't let you do that. You and her are arch-enemies, said Officer Ronald. Yes, what you all see is a beast. But in every bad person, there is always the good in them. I once lived with Jessica. She used to be one of the sweetest girl on earth. I believe that aspect of her is still buried somewhere inside her. I will be the one to dig it out. Then he took a sip from his drink. There is a report from the doctor. Micah will make it. But he needs a blood donor. And this must be done urgently. The officers in the room looked at one another. None was willing to donate his own blood. Take me to the doctor. I will donate my blood, Frank said to the nurse. And then he turned to his team and said, get the supplies ready. Once I return from the guest ward, I will take my move back to the park. Remember, I am going to do this tonight. No other life must be risked. They were all quiet as he left the room. Georgina was with her friends in a rural settlement. When they walked into this village, the women and children were staring at them with wide eyes. And as they approached towards these people, the children began to run to their mothers. Gradually, the villagers were beginning to circle them. Please, we need water, Jane pleaded. But these people could not hear nor speak English. They had been isolated from the modern society for centuries. It had taken Georgina and her friends 3 days without food nor water to arrive at this settlement. The men in this village perceived these beautiful ladies as a threat since they could not understand nor speak their language. With their spears, they were getting ready to attack them. But Georgina quickly knelt down before them and raised her hands as a sign of surrender. That was when a car drove in. It looked like a van and a lady hopped out of it. She was dressed in a modern style. And once the villagers saw her, they created a space for her to walk through. Are you from Micah? She asked. And the ladies nodded their heads. Then she turned to these hostile and curious villagers and she began to speak in their dialect. Mambuzu ikati mu maji itio. And once she said that, they all retreated to their huts. It's fine, sweethearts. I am their doctor and have saved many of them from death and other forms of pandemic in the past. They won't hurt you while I'm here. It was then that the ladies breathed a sigh of relief. Who is Micah to you? Georgina asked. And the pretty lady replied. My name is Christable. Micah is my only brother. What are you doing with these villagers? Jane asked. She laughed at her question. Peace of mind, my dear. Look at their environment. The waters are clean. The weather is healthy and blissful. The foods are fresh and natural. City life is a scam. I prefer this place. And besides, I have the responsibility of taking care of all these people. It is called finding your purpose. I can't let them down. She went closer to Georgina and she said to her, I have to address your wounds, miss. Sorry for not introducing ourselves. Georgina replied. My name is Georgina. The one on my right is Kate and the second one is Jane. We are happy to have run into you. And we deeply appreciate everything you have done for us so far. We are still alive, all thanks to you. You are all welcome. I will be back in a moment. She said with a smile. She was about to leave when Georgina held her hand. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my friends here need urgent attention. Can you save them, please? Georgina pleaded. Micah's sister was surprised by Georgina's request. Amongst you three, you are the one that needs most of this medical attention, yet you are fighting for your friends before your own self. Micah was right about you. He told me that you are a very rare type. And it seems he is right. Then she walked up to them and he pressed her hand on the wall and it transformed into a modern room with all kinds of facilities in it. Georgina and her friends opened their mouth in disbelief. They were astonished by what they had seen. She touched her car and it changed into a new car. What you ladies have just witnessed is the future technology that is still yet unknown to the outside world. They humans might think they are smart and civilized, but they still have a long way to go before they could even harness the power of the universe. I will save all of you. No one here should ever panic. As far as you are with me, I assure you everything is under control. She really looks like Micah, Kate said. How do we tell her about her brother? Jane asked. Georgina managed to stand on her feet and then she walked around this huge building for an inspection. She was wowed by what she discovered. From the outside, the house looked very archaic. But once you pressed your hands on the walls, everything began to change into modern facilities. And inside this same building, they discovered many technologies that have not yet reached the modern society. It was a mystery to them. But they held it to themselves, waiting for the right time to ask her about all those mysteries that they had seen. Meanwhile, the protests in the country had continued to rise and to escalate to almost every part of the county. Even though Jessica was the leader of this organization, she was still taking orders from the president and his daughter. The president of South Africa was married to a Chinese lady and he had a daughter that looked exactly like the Chinese. She was born and raised in China. But she normally returned occasionally to monitor the affairs of her dad's organization. Her name was Mitchell. In the recent times, there had been misunderstanding between Mitchell and Jessica. The two ladies had always been at loggerheads with each other and things would have been worse if not been for the influence of the president. But this time, he was still in China and his daughter was managing the affairs of the country on his behalf. Mitchell gave an order for Jessica's parents to be killed and dispossessed. When Jessica heard this outrageous command from Mitchell, she stood against it. She was now protecting her parents from being killed. Jessica stormed into the chambers. Mitchell was seated with her leg crossed and she was in a sexy red gown. She was also surrounded by guards who were well equipped with sophisticated rifles. I can't remember summoning you into my chamber, you little brat. Mitchell said. I can take every nonsense from you. But I won't allow you lay your hands on my parents. I want them released right now. or I shall give you war." Mitchell burst into laughter. "Look who is talking. A nobody that my father picked from the gutters. Your parents are worthless. Not to talk of you, Jessica, you are a nobody." Then she stood up from her seat and then walked up to Jessica. She landed a heavy slap on her cheek. She also poured glass of wine on Jessica's hair while she smiled and mocked her family. "Your parents are going down this night. And after they are gone, you will be the next. But for now, you are no longer the leader of this organization. I have handed power over to Potbelly. You will remain in prison because that is your rightful place. You don't deserve all these entitlements from my father. And now that my father is not around, I will make sure you are dead before he returns." Once she was done mocking Jessica, she signaled the guards to arrest her and put her in prison, from where she would be shipped over to China. 2 guards restrained Jessica and they carried her away to the prison yard. On their way to the prison, which is underground, Jessica swiftly kicked both guards on their groin and she snatched their guns and shot both of them. The sound of the shots only attracted more guards and she began to shoot at them as well. It was a fierce battle, everywhere was in chaos. She took cover beneath a car and began to shoot at those guards who were firing back at her. She dropped 2 grenades near the prison lodge which exploded and destroyed the cars and equipments nearby. The guards began to throw in their own grenades, but before it could land on her, she jumped into a container and she was able to evade the heavy explosion that followed. She would shoot from one point and then swing over to another point while her head was low in order to avoid the bullets flying over her head. Her next move was to break the door to the room where her parents were. She kicked the door with her leg multiple times and it collapsed. "Let's get out of here," she said. They followed behind their daughter and she was shooting down guards who tried to attack her from various angles. In order to create a diversion, she went to the prison lodge and unlocked all the doors, thereby allowing thousands of girls to escape out of the prison. Everywhere was in chaos, the sounds of bullets and explosions were echoing all around. Some of these ladies trying to escape were now the prime targets as the guards began to shoot at them as well. Some managed to escape while others were shot dead or injured. This site was surrounded by water. So the ladies who could swim were able to escape by diving into the water and swimming out of sight, while some ladies who could drive were able to sneak into the cars that were in the park. Because of their huge number, some of them would attack these guards and after a thorough beating, they would collect the keys and they would just drive off. The remaining guards had no choice but to seek for backup and soon, the whole place was surrounded by thousands of guards. Those who could not escape before the arrival of the guards were recaptured and taken back to the prison. Jessica escaped with her parents. But Mitchell was so furious that she deployed hundreds of men to go after them. She knew that these ladies that had just escaped were going to implicate them by telling the whole world what the president had been doing in the dark, so she launched a full attack to ensure that not even a soul left that site alive. She ordered the guards not to capture, but to kill every person they see. Soldiers were also authorized to mount roadblocks and to arrest any human with certain plate numbers at the front of their cars. Then, she sent in divers into the water to capture those that tried to escape through swimming. "Bring all of them back within 24 hours or you all are dead," she said to the guards, and in their numbers, they swung into action. The soldiers who were supposed to protect the citizens of South Africa turned out to be the attackers. They were just following orders from the government, and once they spotted any lady that looked strange and odd, immediately, they would arrest them and take them back to the same park. These soldiers were rewarded heavily, so they ignored the pleading and cries of these innocent women. "Please, don't take me back to that place. They are going to kill me," begged one of the ladies. "I am the only child of my parents. Please don't take me back to that place, I beg of you." They cried, they screamed, they pleaded with the soldiers not to take them back, but they ignored them all. The money was too much to overlook. Jessica had managed to enter her car and with her parents, she escaped from the park. She was cruising at full speed and soon, she ran into a group of soldiers who were already blocking the path according to the instructions being given to them. She marched the brake. And her face changed. The soldiers were walking towards them with their guns ready for battle. "Mum, Dad, bend your heads and never look up. What are you trying to do?" her mum asked. She was in total fear and anxiety. The first soldier that lowered his face to observe the driver was grabbed by Jessica and she punched his nose with her fist, and then she grabbed her gun and began to shoot at these officers. She shot down 2 of them and the rest began to bombard her car with bullets. Jessica only smiled as though nothing was going on. She released the brake and fired the car at full speed. She was driving with one hand and shooting at these soldiers with the other hand. She held firmly the steering and she had to break through the barricade that was placed on the road. But as these soldiers were about to reach her car, a bullet flew from nowhere and landed directly on their fuel tank, which exploded the car and it tumbled multiple times before crashing to a nearby building. That was the first truck. As for the second truck, another bullet flew from nowhere and it hit the driver, and suddenly he lost control of the wheels and the truck crashed into the sea. Jessica was confused. She was trying to locate her helper and she still had her rifle in case if it was an enemy that had been picking out these soldiers. Then a figure emerged in the air. He was dressed like a soldier and his face was covered. He was suspended in the air with the aid of a rope. It turned out to be Frank. He had come for his sister, and all these while, he was hiding on top of a very giant tree. That was the main reason why the soldiers couldn't locate his position. It was after he had dismantled the 2 trucks that he flew down from the top of the tree by holding onto a rope. His landing was epic. Once his feet landed on the ground, he tumbled multiple times and then he grabbed the door of his car and with his strength, he yanked it off. Jessica was wowed by what she saw. All these while, she had been trying to pull out her parents from underneath the car, but once Frank arrived, he just yanked off the door and pulled them out. The family was reunited. Jessica ran to Frank and threw a hug at him. She held him tightly as she began to sob. "I am sorry for what I have done, brother. Or Winnan. But I have a valuable information that can destroy this organization once and for all." A car drove in and Frank, Jessica, and their parents hopped in and the driver took them away. Mitchell was so frustrated that she went berserk. She was throwing things at her top officials. "You all are useless," she screamed. "Why did you let her escape? Just a lady, just a single lady, and you all with all your experiences and strength could not capture her. I am disappointed with all of you. And you all are going to pay with your lives." Because of the situation of things, the president had to leave China for South Africa. He was supposed to stay for 2 weeks, but after his daughter had informed him that Jessica had escaped from the park and was no longer a part of the organization, he knew that he was in a great danger. He was the one that trained Jessica and he knew what she was capable of. Especially if she was to combine forces with Frank, her brother. They needed to release this gas before the few ladies that had escaped from the park began to spread their plans to the rest of the world. At their base, Micah was making a speedy recovery. He was not entirely fit for any challenging task, but he could move around and chat with the other officers. "I want to talk to you, Frank," Micah said. At that point, Frank was training with his sister on how to shoot more accurately from a distance. Both of them were snipers. But Frank was excellent in his field. He had gone to wars and had won many awards. "I will be back," he said to his kid sister, and he rubbed her hair before leaving. They sat in one of the tents, and Micah even offered him a drink. He opened it and poured into Frank's glass before doing so in his own glass cup. Both of them took a sip and they breathed heavily. "I can't remember the last time we sat together in good terms like now. We used to be best of friends. We watched each other's back right then in school. Did you remember?" Frank smiled. "I remember everything. I remember the day you took a bullet for me. It was that particular action from you that sealed my love for you. Everyone had abandoned us because those cultists had guns on them. I too was very anxious. But seeing how boldly you stood for me, it changed everything. It was after that day that I made up my mind to become a soldier. My aspirations were to purge the society of all evil people. That was a turning point for me too." Micah replied. "I knew from that day that without power and authority, there is nothing one can do. Not even the teachers were able to intervene to rescue us from these cultists. They all watched passively." Micah took another sip again. And then he asked Frank, "What's our next move from here? The soldiers with you are suggesting that we seek for reinforcement from Nigeria. Don't you think they are right in a way? I have 10 soldiers, plus myself, Jessica and you. We are more than enough for this operation. All we have to do is sneak in and then deactivate the power plant before it gets released into the air. The second task is to capture the president immediately he lands at the airport. Once we succeed in these 2 missions, we are victorious. A new president will be elected into office. Someone who is transparent, loving, and competent enough to rule the country." Micah was so calm without a word. And Frank asked him, "What's going on in your mind?" He looked at Frank and he said, "Please forgive me for betraying you after all the trust you had in me. Human nature is very complicated. No wonder they said trust nobody." Abi? Since that day at the police quarters, I had been haunted by my actions all these while. I won't be able to forgive myself for what I did to you. I still trust you, Micah. Frank replied. You were the same person that took a bullet for me back then in school. You are a good guy, Micah. I don't care what anybody says about you. But I still love and trust you for the rest of my life. Micah went silent for a while again before he said, Georgina is alive. But she thinks that you are dead. I thought you were dead too until you appeared with your squad. Wait, or did you touch her in any way? Did you? Frank curiously asked. Omo haha. The 3 ladies were so happy in their new environment. The atmosphere was serene and the villagers were jovial as well. They would join Christable for the marathon race. They would run round the entire village without a halt. That was the first duty on the list. The next one was to go to the farm where they would pick some special plants and animals. These were rare animals and species that only found in that settlement. Sometimes, they would leave in the morning and come back very late, tired and famished. But they loved their stay with Christable. She treated them like her own sisters. During the weekend, the villagers would assemble at the square. They would hold a very big festival. There were assorted wines. There were varieties of food as well. The maidens who were dressed in royalty would begin to dance around, and the men, the children, and even the women would all shout and cheer them up as they danced. At some point in this feast, warriors in the land would begin to spar with one another. They would fight with their strength, and whoever remained undefeated would be awarded many prizes and honors. It was quite fun to watch, especially for the visitors, Georgina and her friends. There was this particular guy, tall and dark. He had huge muscles and had been their champion for so many seasons. He was defeating his opponents with little efforts as though they were no human. Sanctu acritat Jumini Femini. He said, and everywhere went quiet. He had just made an audacious demand. He said to the king, I want that lady over there. I want to marry her. The villagers began to cheer and murmur. Their eyes were fixated on Georgina. And even though she could not understand their language, she knew they were talking about her. What's going on? Georgina asked Christable. She didn't look so happy. In that settlement, Ashaki was known as the commander of the entire army. He was the one the king relied on in times of challenges, wars and exploits. There was no way the king could deny his wish. That guy over there wants to make you his wife starting from this night. And the king has approved his wish already. Georgina smiled without saying a word. Let's get out of here. Before he forces you to marry him. We have to leave this village tonight. Jane said with a high level of anxiety. Kate and Jane were trying to drag Georgina secretly out of the ceremony, but she refused. Tell the king I accept his challenge. But on one condition. What is the condition? Christable asked with an open eyes. I want to fight him in this arena and before all the villagers. If he defeats me, I shall be his wife. But if I make him tap out, then he would be doing all my chores and running errands for me. You must be joking. Christable replied. That guy over there had been their champion for a long period of time. He is their strongest fighter, and you won't last a second in a fight with such a monster. Christable along with Georgina's friends were trying their best to persuade her out of the fight. But she had already made up her mind. She pulled off her sweater, wearing only a tight singlet and a black leggings. These would enable her to move freely. Common. She signaled him to attack her first. Part of the reason why Georgina wore that type of dress was also to distract the man. He was already staring at the wrong part of her body. And this was making him to lose control. The first punch was landed by Georgina, who jumped from the ground, and once in the air, she punched his cheek. But this point didn't have much effect on him. But it triggered a response from him. He charged at Georgina, but she was so clever that she dived to another spot, making him to miss the kick. But then, he managed to grab her hair with one hand, and he held her in the air. The villagers began to cheer their champion. Ashaki Aluna etif wura wura. Ashaki Aluna efaluya wura wura. They were singing praises to his name as their champion. They were also using these songs to boost Ashaki's morale. He then turned Georgina upside down, holding her by her feet while her head was pointing to the ground. Because of this posture, Georgina was struggling to breath. Christable and her friends were so frantic, their body were trembling, and they didn't know what to do to save their friend. That was when she came up with a plan. Georgina is very smart and skillful. At this point, the huge guy had trashed her on the ground. With his hand, he began to choke Georgina with full force. "Hey, do something. Let's save her now," Kate shouted on top of her voice. Aside Kate and Jane and Christable, the rest of the villagers were happy and in jubilant mode. They drank excessively while they laughed and kept pointing at the lady. "Sekuta Mayana Asipukai. Please save the girl. She is just young and naive," Christable begged. She kept pleading with the king, but he ignored her voice just like the rest of the villagers. Christable had to force her way through the crowd as he returned to her house. She brought out a powerful rifle. She grabbed the bullets and loaded them to the gun. But on returning back to that same location, she was startled by what she saw. The tide had changed. Georgina was able to summon some level of energy in her body, and with a full force, she blasted his loin. She kicked that spot between his legs and he let out a very loud scream. And as usual, she decided to use the power of her thighs. This was a giant that was 10 times the size of Georgina. Next thing she did was to wrap her thighs around his head. She held his head so tight and they both tumbled on the ground. He was now sweating so badly. You could see the veins in his head. He tried so hard to pull away her legs. But each time he wanted to pry out her legs, she would tighten the hold even more. She was sweating so heavily. But she didn't want to leave the man. It reached to a point where this giant was beginning to fade off. His head was hurting so bad. He was beginning to feel the shame of being beaten by a young fragile lady. Her ankles were locked so tightly around his head. He could see her smile, a smile of victory, as he began to fade out. All he could do was groan and scream. Georgina was the softest of heart. But when angry, she had no limit to what she could do to her opponent. The man stopped breathing and his hands were still. When she released him from that hold, she landed on the floor. The whole place was quiet. Everyone was in complete silence, looking at this young lady that had taught their giant a very big lesson. Christable rushed towards the giant, who was still lying down unconscious. She began to resuscitate Ashaki. "Is he dead?" Jane asked in fear. "It will take a while, but he will be fine," replied Christable. Everyone was scared of Georgina. They wouldn't even come close to her. They all bowed before her in salutation and honor. Georgina followed Christable to her ward. All of a sudden, she was worried about the giant warrior. She sat next to him on the bed and was cooling his temperature with a piece of cloth soaked in water. She would dip the cloth in a cool water and then she would begin to rub it on his neck and chest. "Why do you care about him all of a sudden? This was the same person you had between your legs and you made him pass out. And here you are caring for him and being worried about his health. You put him in this condition." "Right. I have a soft heart. Georgina replied. Everything I did was on self-defense. He would have injured me badly if I didn't fight back. I just want to apologize to him. That's all. Micah lied to Frank that he didn't do anything with Georgina. And Frank believed him without a doubt. Of course I trust Georgina. She can never betray me, Frank said with full confidence. Micah smiled in his mind. Only time will tell. The president was already on his way from China and he would reach South Africa in few hours. This was the perfect time for them to execute their plan. Frank was already kitted up. He was in a black suit and a black eyeglass. He has 2 rifles strapped to his waist. This was a mission of 2, Frank and Jessica. Jessica too was dressed in black suit and black goggle. She was a sniper and carried her gun in a suitcase. Are you ready, little sis? Frank asked. She smiled and then she showed him a fist. Guys, get ready and keep us informed if anything goes wrong, okay? This time, they didn't use their car. They had opted for a very sophisticated bike cyclist. These motorbikes were so fast and could be used to launch bombs during attacks. They had ordered for it specially from the United States Military Organization. The president arrived and standing before him were his special guards, about 8 of them all dressed in black suits. The only problem was that amongst these special guards was Frank. He was not a member of these special guards. But he was able to blend in without being caught. Earlier that day, he had lured one of the guards into a corner. And then he knocked him out and took his communication device. He was amongst these 8 special guards, but none of them were aware of his presence. On the other hand, Jessica was positioned very high on top of a skyscraper. She was the one that will gun down the driver and also the other guards. Once Jessica had taken out all the guards, it would just be Frank and the president in the car. And then he would capture him and take him away to their own base. This was the plan. But only time shall tell if they would succeed or not. How do you feel about this story? For the ladies, how do you rate this beautiful young lady called Georgina? Imagine what she went through to be able to overcome a giant just with her thighs and cleverness. She used to practice martial arts as a child. But is that still enough to be able to bring down a giant? What do you think about this particular episode?